Hello and welcome to another episode of the Shakespeare podcast. In this episode, we'll be introducing Shakespeare's play, Julius Caesar. It appears that Shakespeare wrote Julius Caesar in 1599, because there are people who mention the play around that time. But it wasn't published, of course, until 1623 and the first folio of Shakespeare's complete works. The play appears in the first folio in the tragedy section, and it's entitled The Tragedy of Julius Caesar, and other early sources call the play The Life and Death of Julius Caesar. We just call it Julius Caesar because we don't know whose tragedy this play is supposed to portray. Is it Julius Caesar's tragedy, or is it Brutus's tragedy? But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back. Why is Shakespeare writing a play about a Roman general who was murdered in 44 BC? Put simply, the Elizabethans were crazy about ancient Rome and ancient Greece, sometimes referred to together as classical antiquity. It was all the rage and the height of fashion, and Elizabethan audiences couldn't get enough of Roman and Greek models of literature and art. So Shakespeare picked probably the most famous Roman in Julius Caesar, and the most famous thing about him, that he was assassinated, and he turned it into a play. The murder of Julius Caesar, ladies and gentlemen. You've heard about it, you've read about it. Now see it for yourself, ladies and gentlemen, live on stage at the Globe Theatre for a limited time only. Terms and conditions apply. We, the audience, know what's going to happen, and so Shakespeare milks it for all it's worth. Julius Caesar, we know, is going to be assassinated, and Shakespeare uses that knowledge to his advantage in writing the play. We see Julius Caesar's triumphant entry into Rome. Notice here that there's an analogy with Jesus' triumphant entry into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. We know how that story ends too. And we see Julius Caesar ignoring the soothsayer 3 different times, who tells him to beware the Ides of March. And on the Ides of March, Caesar says to the soothsayer, "Hey, it's the Ides of March and I'm still here." And the soothsayer says, "Well, it's not over yet, mate. It's not over yet." Listen while Julius Caesar makes plans for the future, when we, the audience, know that he doesn't actually have any future. Julius Caesar saying "Et tu, Brute" as he heads for the deck for the final time. These are the things that the Elizabethan audience wanted to see. This was the draw for the play. See the actual Julius Caesar being actually murdered on an actual stage. Of course, Julius Caesar never said "Et tu, Brute." We have 2 different Roman accounts of Julius Caesar's assassination, one in Plutarch and one in Suetonius, and neither of them have Caesar saying "Et tu, Brute" or anything like that. But of course, the general public, even in Shakespeare's time, believed that that's what Julius Caesar said when he was assassinated. So Shakespeare has Julius Caesar say "Et tu, Brute." If that's what the audience wants, then that's what the audience gets. In much the same way that Robin Hood didn't really wear green tights, but the audience has paid good money to see this pantomime. This leads us to the whole question of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar and actual historical events. Plenty of books have been written about Shakespeare playing fast and loose with historical accounts and events, and even more books about Shakespeare's so-called double time, when Shakespeare messes with time to compress the action or put things in a more dramatic light. What Shakespeare's writing is a play, not a documentary. It's not a history book, and it's not intended to be realistic, whatever that might mean. No, Shakespeare's Julius Caesar is a play designed to keep the audience's attention and give the audience exactly what they've come to see. What we want is the murder of Julius Caesar. What we want is a behind-the-scenes look at the conspiracy which leads to the assassination, who was involved, and who said what to whom. Julius Caesar's appraisal of the political situation in Act 1, as he enters Rome triumphantly, is actually a very good one. Caesar knows that Cassius is a dangerous man and a danger to his power, but he also knows that Cassius needs the help and support of Brutus. So part of the conspiracy story is how Cassius is going to get Brutus to join with those who think that Caesar should be killed, and how Brutus is convinced. So in Act 2, Scene 1, it's Brutus who compares Caesar to a serpent's egg, quote unquote, that must be killed before it's hatched. But has he already been influenced by Cassius, telling him in Act 1, "The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves that we are underlings." Again, we the audience know what will happen in the end. But Shakespeare gives us a behind-the-scenes peek at how the conspiracy unfolds for real. It's not that this is what really happened historically, it's that the motivation of the characters in the play are recognisable, not just to Shakespeare's audience, but also to us. Cassius, Caesar tells us, is lean and hungry, quote unquote, and dangerous. Cassius is the working class politician who ensnares Brutus by using his vanity against him. "Look," says Cassius, "Caesar is above us, we are mere underlings." And Brutus jumps up at the very thought that he could be considered an underling. And so Cassius gives Brutus what we would call a bit of blarney, and tells him, "Well, you're just as good as Caesar. You have just as much right to be the top dog as Caesar does. Why should Julius Caesar have it all for himself? Doesn't Brutus come from just as noble a family as Julius Caesar does?" It's easy for us to see how Brutus might be drawn into the conspiracy, based on how important he thinks he is. And it makes sense for the less high-born, but nevertheless clever Cassius to realise that playing this card will be effective with Brutus. Before he knows it, Brutus is being won over to the side of the conspirators, and we watch it happen, knowing the inevitable outcome of Brutus's decision. So, the first half of the play concerns the conspiracy to murder Julius Caesar and the assassination, and we the audience might think that we've seen what we've come to see. But Shakespeare hasn't finished with Julius Caesar just yet. Once Caesar has been murdered, surely you want to know what happened at the funeral. It's Julius Caesar, the famous Roman general. Do you want to see what happened at his funeral? Antony's speech at his friend's funeral, the one that begins, "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears," is one of the most famous speeches Shakespeare ever wrote. And it's central, not just to the plot, because it changes the public's view of Caesar's assassination, but also to one of the main themes of the play, that words matter, that words have power, and in this particular context, that words have political power. It's a speech that rewards in-depth textual analysis, as Shakespeare pulls out every rhetorical trick in the book. It's an extended firework display of the figures and tropes of oratory, which uses us, the audience, as the crowd in the forum. It's as if this funeral speech, on behalf of Julius Caesar, the famous Roman general, is directed towards us, the audience. So when Antony tells his audience, "If you have tears, prepare to shed them now," he is of course talking to the forum in Rome in 44 BC. But he's also talking to us, the audience, right here, right now. In the theatre, Shakespeare's trick of concertinaing 2,000 years of history into one moment often takes the audience by surprise. as if the audience didn't realise until the last moment that Antony is actually talking to you and me. If you have tears, prepare to shed them now. And so we don't just get to see the funeral of Julius Caesar, the famous Roman general. We get to participate in the funeral of Julius Caesar, the famous Roman general. Having got the audience so involved in the action of the play, we cannot finish the story there, because we want to know what's going to happen to Caesar's assassins. Yes, what it's important to notice here is that although Shakespeare's audience knew that Julius Caesar was assassinated, they would not have known very much about what happened next. Much like a modern audience, Shakespeare's audience had no idea what was going to happen in Act 4 and Act 5. Antony and Octavius and Lepidus brutally suppressed the conspirators. The death of Cinna the poet, and later the reference to Cicero's death, are indicators that truth in general has died, that poetry is finished, and brutality and bloodshed are all that will follow. Everything that happens is overshadowed by Caesar, of course. Cinna dreams of him, Brutus sees his ghost. There's another exchange of words between Brutus and Cassius and Antony and Octavius before the Battle of Philippi. The battle proper, as it were. Spoiler alert, both Cassius and Brutus kill themselves as they lose the battle and decides that it's better to die than to be taken prisoner. All this is news to the audience, and of course Shakespeare is messing around with time again to make everything fit into the last two acts of the play. And we don't mind that, because what we've come to see is a play, not a history book. The important thing to notice is the emphasis on Caesar and how the death of the conspirators, especially Brutus and Cassius, is seen as revenge for his assassination. Cassius even points out that he kills himself with the same sword that he used to kill Caesar. The final lines of the play are given to Octavius, because later he's going to become Caesar Augustus. That's in a different play, and you don't really need to know that now. And so, for the price of a ticket to the theatre, we've got to see the conspiracy against Caesar, the assassination of Julius Caesar. You got to participate at his funeral and witness the civil war which led to the death of the conspirators. Not bad for a Wednesday afternoon. So that's the short answer to the question, why did Shakespeare write a play about a Roman general who was murdered in 44 BC? Now, why it's still worth studying is a question that we'll look at later in the next two podcasts. But for now, for this episode, we've just introduced Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time on the Shakespeare podcast.